Everyone expected chaos the moment the cops approached. The street outside the small London cafe buzzed with the usual afternoon chatter. Pedestrians crossing, the hum of double-decker buses, the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee. But the moment the officers stepped out of their police car, everything changed. Keanu Reeves was sitting quietly at a corner table, sipping a cappuccino. His wife chatted softly beside him. No cameras. No bodyguards. Just a simple, peaceful afternoon. Most people passed without noticing him, completely unaware that the Hollywood star was right in front of them. And yet, something unusual was about to happen. Two officers, seemingly unaware of who they were dealing with, started walking toward the couple. One had a stern expression, the other fidgeted with his handcuffs. They didn't shout. They didn't run. But there was tension in the air, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift that made the cafe patrons glance nervously toward the entrance. Everyone expected Keanu to get angry. They thought he would shout, maybe storm out, or even call for help. But he didn't. Instead, he set his cup down slowly, eyes calm, almost unreadable. A small, knowing smile touched his lips. It was the kind of smile that made people stop in their tracks, even if they didn't fully understand why. The officers paused, unsure how to proceed. They weren't expecting this calm. They didn't know that Keanu had just been appointed as the new chief of the precinct, a detail they hadn't bothered to check. The street seemed to hold its breath. Pedestrians slowed, some stopped completely, sensing something extraordinary was unfolding. Even the cafe staff froze mid-step, glancing at the scene through the windows. And then one of the officers spoke, a note of authority in his voice, completely unaware of the irony of the situation. "Step aside, sir. We need to handcuff you for questioning." A collective gasp rippled through the few onlookers who recognized him. Keanu remained seated. His eyes locked on the officer. No panic. No sudden movements. Just stillness. And in that stillness, everyone realized, whatever happened next would surprise them all. Because nothing about this afternoon was ordinary, and Keanu Reeves was about to prove it. The cafe hummed with the usual afternoon rhythm. The smell of freshly baked pastries mixed with the faint scent of coffee beans, and a soft indie playlist played in the background. Outside, a gentle drizzle had left the streets glistening, reflecting the warm lights of the cafe windows. Keanu Reeves and his wife sat tucked in a quiet corner, far from the bustling crowd. Their table was small, round, and unassuming, with two steaming cups in front of them. It looked like any other couple enjoying a peaceful afternoon, except for the quiet aura that seemed to surround Keanu, an energy that made people glance, then quickly look away, unsure why he felt so familiar. They spoke softly, leaning toward each other, completely absorbed in their conversation. No cameras, no flashes, just the simple joy of a shared moment. Passers-by outside walked by, umbrellas in hand, some glancing at the cafe windows, but most unaware that they were mere feet away from one of the world's most famous actors. It wasn't a moment meant for the public eye. Keanu had intentionally chosen this spot for its simplicity, a place where they could blend in, even if just for a little while. A server moved past, carrying a tray of croissants. He paused for a second, taking in the couple. "Looks familiar. Maybe from a movie?" he muttered under his breath before moving on. Around them, life continued as usual. People laughed over coffee, smartphones tapped, and bicycles clattered along the cobblestone streets outside. It was calm. It was ordinary. And that ordinary calm made what was about to happen all the more shocking. Keanu leaned back, observing the cafe with a quiet attentiveness. His eyes weren't just scanning for cameras or fans, they were noticing the subtle movements, the body language of everyone around him. Even the slight tension in the barista's shoulders didn't escape him. He seemed present, completely in the moment, but there was an underlying awareness that this afternoon wouldn't remain peaceful for long. Then, from outside, the faint roar of motorcycles cut through the quiet drizzle. At first, it was just a low rumble, almost dismissible as traffic noise. But it grew louder, heavier, until the hum of engines filled the street and drew attention from everyone inside the cafe. A group of bikers had stopped nearby. Their leather jackets gleamed under the soft, wet streetlights. They laughed loudly, voices carrying across the street, trying to impress each other with bold gestures and exaggerated stories. It was a sound that didn't belong to the calm afternoon, a noise that immediately pulled everyone's attention toward the entrance. One of them, taller than the rest, noticed the couple through the window. His eyes widened slightly, not in recognition but in curiosity. He made a careless, mocking comment, loud enough for those at nearby tables to overhear. The cafe's atmosphere shifted instantly. Conversation died down. A few heads turned, unsure whether to intervene or ignore it. Even the pedestrians outside slowed, sensing something unusual about the interaction. Keanu didn't flinch. His hands remained on the table. His gaze was calm but piercing. There was a quiet strength in the way he observed the bikers, a stillness that made it clear he wasn't intimidated. The kind of calm that makes everyone else question their next move. And yet, for the moment, he said nothing. He let the tension linger just long enough to make it unmistakably clear. Something was about to happen and everyone would notice. No one in the cafe, no passerby on the street, had any idea that Keanu wasn't just a visitor here today. He was, in fact, the newly appointed chief of the precinct, a fact that would soon make this ordinary afternoon anything but ordinary. The rumble of motorcycles grew louder, echoing down the quiet London street. The bikers, a tight-knit group clad in leather jackets, boots and chrome-studded gloves, had parked haphazardly near the cafe entrance. Their engines purred like predators circling their prey, a subtle yet unmistakable signal that they weren't here just to enjoy the drizzle. Inside, the cafe felt smaller, more crowded. Patrons instinctively edged closer to their tables, mugs of coffee clutched tightly as they watched the unfolding scene. A few whispered, "Is that Keanu Reeves?" Their voices trembled with disbelief. Some shook their heads, unsure whether to watch or quietly leave. The tallest biker, a man with a thick beard and a laugh that carried over the street, noticed the couple immediately. His eyes lingered on Keanu, scanning the familiar face, but he didn't recognize him. All he saw was a man sitting alone with his wife, seemingly oblivious to the world outside. "Oi, what's this then?" the biker sneered, his voice sharp and playful, but with an edge that hinted at trouble. He waved toward the couple, mocking gestures accompanying his words. "Hiding away like proper posh people, yeah?" Laughter erupted from his friends. They slapped each other on the back, making jokes and catcalling toward the cafe windows. The sound carried across the street, bouncing off the wet pavement. Pedestrians paused, unsure whether to intervene, while a few brave souls snapped pictures from their phones. Keanu didn't move. He didn't flinch. His hands remained calmly on the table, resting near the steaming cappuccino. His gaze, however, had sharpened. Every subtle twitch, every mocking smirk, every unnecessary gesture from the bikers registered in his mind. The barista, hiding behind the counter, whispered nervously to a coworker, "Do you think they're going to start something?" But the answer was obvious. Tension was rising, thick enough to slice through with a knife. Outside, one biker took a step closer to the cafe, leaning against the glass window. "What, we can't even enjoy a bit of fun without someone staring at us?" he jeered, pointing a finger at Keanu. The comment wasn't threatening yet, but it carried the weight of potential escalation. The crowd inside shifted uncomfortably. A waitress froze mid-step, holding a tray of scones. Even the couple's nearby table of ordinary customers went silent. Something about the way the bikers carried themselves, loud yet deliberate, made the moment feel heavier than any ordinary street annoyance. And then the officer who had earlier approached Keanu stepped forward, hand on his belt, clearly preparing for intervention. But he hesitated. He hadn't expected the couple to sit so calmly. He didn't realize that Keanu was no ordinary civilian. Keanu finally lifted his eyes to meet the tallest biker's gaze. His expression remained calm, almost unreadable. But there was an undeniable presence in the way he looked, an authority that demanded attention without raising his voice. The biker paused mid-laugh. Something in that quiet gaze made him falter. The laughter around him slowed. His friends exchanged confused glances. For the first time they realized this was no ordinary man. But none of them yet knew who he really was. And that fact, unknown to them, would make everything about to unfold even more shocking. The cafe seemed to shrink around the rising tension. The soft chatter and clinking of coffee cups had vanished, replaced by the low hum of wet tires and the uneven breathing of onlookers. Every eye in the room, every pedestrian on the glistening London street, turned toward the unfolding scene at the cafe window. Keanu Reeves remained seated, hands resting calmly near his cappuccino. His gaze, steady and unshakable, swept the bikers like a silent warning. No one could predict his next move, and that uncertainty made every heartbeat in the room quicken. The tallest biker, who had been leaning on the glass, laughing and pointing, suddenly noticed something. A flicker of unease crossed his face. He squinted, trying to read Keanu's expression. Was this man afraid? Was he about to bolt? Or something else entirely? Keanu slowly lifted his cup, almost deliberately, and took a measured sip. It was a small, mundane gesture, but in that moment it carried weight. It was calmness in the face of chaos. Authority in its purest form. The cafe seemed to breathe along with him. Patrons instinctively leaned back, giving him space without realizing why. The biker glanced at his friends. "Oi, he's just sitting there. What's he gonna do? Say something posh?" His voice carried the arrogance of someone convinced the man posed no threat. But Keanu didn't speak. Not yet. Instead, he set the cup down with deliberate care. The soft clink on the saucer was loud in the tense silence. He straightened his posture, shoulders squared, head held high. Every subtle movement commanded attention, even without a word. Outside, the officer who had attempted to intervene earlier shifted nervously. His hand hovered near his belt, unsure whether to act. The bikers' laughter had paused, replaced by cautious glances at each other. They had assumed intimidation would work, but the calm before them was unnerving, almost unnatural. And then Keanu rose from his chair. Slowly, deliberately. The cafe held its breath. Patrons froze mid-step, their phones half raised in the air. Even the barista, hidden behind the counter, leaned forward to see. Outside, the bikers instinctively stepped back. The tallest one's grin faltered. Something about Keanu's stance, steady, confident, entirely controlled, made him hesitate for the first time that afternoon. Keanu walked toward the window. Not angrily. Not in a rush. But each step carried weight. Authority. Calm power. It was the kind of presence that made others rethink their actions without a single shout. A soft murmur rippled through the street. Pedestrians stopped. Cars slowed. The city itself seemed to pause, caught in the suspense of the moment. And then a single phrase, spoken quietly but deliberately, cut through the tension like a blade. Respect shows who we really are. The biker froze mid-laugh. His friend stopped, unsure how to respond. The officer flinched, realizing he had underestimated the situation. Even onlookers instinctively leaned closer, drawn to the calm force in the words. Keanu's eyes met the tallest biker's directly. There was no anger. No threat. Just a quiet, unyielding authority that demanded acknowledgement. And in that pause, half a heartbeat stretched into eternity, everyone understood. This was not an ordinary man. The biker's bravado began to falter. His laughter died in his throat. The street seemed quieter, the drizzle softer, as if the world itself had leaned in to witness what came next. And then, Keanu reached for his coat, ready to step outside. No one moved. No one dared breathe. The suspense was absolute. Because what the bikers didn't know, and what everyone watching now could barely comprehend, was that Keanu Reeves wasn't just any man on the street. He was their new chief. And in that quiet moment, the balance of power shifted completely. For a long moment, the street was silent. The drizzle had softened to a gentle mist, the motorcycles idling like reluctant predators, and the cafe patrons were frozen in place, holding their breath. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Keanu Reeves as he stood calmly by the window, the authority in his posture unmistakable. The tallest biker, the one who had been mocking them moments ago, swallowed nervously. His friends exchanged glances, the bravado in their eyes now replaced by confusion and unease. They hadn't expected the calm, the quiet force emanating from Keanu. They hadn't realized they were no longer in control. Keanu spoke, softly, almost gently, but every word carried weight. Respect shows who we really are. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't a threat. It was a simple truth spoken with quiet confidence. The biker flinched, the words piercing him deeper than any insult could. His friends stopped laughing mid-sentence, their mockery fading into stunned silence. The officers nearby, who had been uncertain and tense moments ago, straightened, suddenly aware that the man they were dealing with wasn't an ordinary civilian. They had come to handcuff someone they thought might be defiant or uncooperative, but instead they witnessed authority that didn't need enforcement. The tallest biker, trembling slightly, opened his mouth, unsure what to say. Keanu's gaze never wavered. It was calm yet unyielding, like a lighthouse guiding ships away from dangerous rocks. In that moment, the biker realized that his arrogance, his attempt to dominate the situation, had been entirely misplaced. A long pause followed. The drizzle continued softly, the streetlights reflecting on the wet pavement, and the tension seemed to stretch like elastic. Then, almost reluctantly, the biker muttered, sorry? We didn't mean. Keanu nodded once, small but deliberate. He didn't need to elaborate. The apology was enough. It was acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and that was all he needed. The crowd outside let out subtle breaths they hadn't realized they were holding. Patrons returned to their tables, shaking their heads in disbelief. Some muttered, "Did that really just happen?" Others quietly recorded the moment, knowing they had witnessed something remarkable. Keanu extended his hand to the biker, not aggressively, not as a show of dominance, but as a bridge. The biker hesitated, then took it, a mixture of relief and awe on his face. They shook hands, a simple gesture that diffused the tension entirely. The other bikers shifted uncomfortably, then gradually relaxed, the group's energy transforming from mockery to cautious respect. Even the officer who had initially intended to handcuff Keanu exhaled, relieved that the situation had been resolved without escalation. Keanu returned to his seat with the quiet ease of someone entirely in control. He picked up his cappuccino and took another calm sip as if nothing had happened, yet everything had changed. The cafe's atmosphere shifted back to ordinary, the soft indie music now filling the space once more. Outside, the motorcycles rumbled softly as the bikers remounted and drove away, heads bowed slightly, not in shame, but in recognition of the power of calm, measured authority. The ordinary afternoon had been transformed. What could have escalated into chaos had ended peacefully. And it was all because one man, unshaken by provocation, had chosen clarity and respect over anger and confrontation. The patrons, the officers, the pedestrians, all had witnessed a lesson that went far beyond a single street corner. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't about intimidation. It was about presence, integrity, and the quiet strength of doing the right thing. Keanu's wife smiled, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. They continued their coffee, their laughter soft and genuine. Outside, life began to flow again. The drizzle, the chatter, the hum of traffic. But now, everyone who had watched knew that ordinary moments could carry extraordinary lessons. And the tallest biker, walking away with his friends, glanced back once more. In his eyes was understanding. Sometimes the strongest power isn't aggression. It's respect. The quiet after the confrontation was almost surreal. The drizzle had slowed to a light mist, leaving the cobblestone streets shimmering under the soft glow of the London streetlights. The motorcycles had retreated down the road, their engines a low hum in the distance. Pedestrians resumed their steps, some glancing back, still trying to process what had just unfolded. Inside the cafe, life began to normalize slowly. Cups clinked on saucers, chairs scraped lightly against wooden floors, and the soft hum of conversation tentatively returned. Patrons leaned in to whisper, sharing what they had just witnessed with wide-eyed disbelief. Some pulled out their phones to capture the moment, though many were too stunned to even think about recording. Keanu Reeves, seated once again at his corner table, picked up his cappuccino and smiled gently at his wife. She returned the smile, a quiet acknowledgement of the extraordinary moment they had just endured. Despite the tension earlier, nothing about him had changed. His calm demeanor, unshaken confidence, and subtle authority had carried the day. The officers who had approached earlier exchanged looks of both relief and newfound respect. They had come with the intention of taking action, unaware of Keanu's true role as the new chief. They had expected defiance, perhaps resistance, but instead they had witnessed authority that required no force. Quiet, measured, undeniable authority. The tallest biker, the one who had mocked Keanu moments ago, walked past the cafe once more with his friends. Their postures were more subdued now, the arrogant energy replaced by reflective humility. They didn't speak much, their laughter was gone. But there was a new awareness, an understanding that respect isn't demanded, it's earned quietly with calm strength. Inside the cafe, a few patrons ventured to approach Keanu, whispering words of admiration and disbelief. He acknowledged them with gentle nods, a warm smile, never overstepping the boundary of ordinary civility. Even in a situation that could have escalated into chaos, Keanu had maintained composure, turning what could have been fear or conflict into calm understanding. The cafe staff too recovered from their frozen awe. The barista, who had been hiding behind the counter, finally walked past with a tentative smile. "I've never seen anyone handle a situation like that," he admitted, voice low. Keanu merely nodded, gesturing softly with his hand as if to say, "It's all right. It's just a moment." Outside, life resumed in small, ordinary ways. Pedestrians continued walking, bicycles clattered past, and the distant hum of traffic filled the background. But the difference was palpable. People who had been mere bystanders had now been witnesses to a lesson in calm, authority, and respect. Keanu's wife sipped her coffee and reached across the table, touching his hand lightly. "You handled that perfectly," she whispered. There was no dramatic applause or overt fanfare, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that tension had been defused, a potential conflict turned into a peaceful resolution. The tallest biker, now at a distance, glanced back one more time. There was a subtle nod in his eyes, not of submission but of recognition. Recognition that the power of calm, clear judgment surpasses the force of aggression. The other bikers murmured among themselves, reflecting on the unusual encounter, and slowly began to disperse, leaving the street finally empty of tension. Back in the cafe, the atmosphere had returned to a quiet, almost ordinary calm. Yet, anyone who had witnessed the events knew it was anything but ordinary. The day had been transformed, not by violence or confrontation, but by presence, poise, and unwavering composure. Keanu leaned back, picking up his cappuccino once more. He sipped slowly, eyes scanning the cafe with quiet awareness. Outside, pedestrians resumed their strolls, carrying with them an unspoken story of humility, respect, and the subtle power of calm authority. The officers prepared to leave, their demeanors more respectful than when they had arrived. They had been reminded, silently but unmistakably, that authority is not about loud voices or quick actions. It is about patience, understanding, and measured responses. And for the people who had watched the events unfold, the lesson was clear. Moments that could have turned into chaos were transformed into lessons in humanity. Ordinary afternoons, ordinary streets, ordinary people. All had been touched by an extraordinary display of respect, composure, and calm strength. In that small cafe in London, life returned to normal, but the impact of the afternoon lingered. The tension was gone, replaced by a subtle energy that carried the weight of a profound lesson. And for everyone who had witnessed it, there was a quiet reminder. Sometimes the most powerful victories are won not with aggression, but with calmness, clarity, and respect. The street outside the cafe had finally quieted. The drizzle had stopped, leaving a gentle mist that shimmered under the London streetlights. Life seemed to resume its ordinary pace. Pedestrians walked briskly, bicycles clattered over wet cobblestones, and the distant hum of traffic filled the background. But for those who had witnessed what unfolded, this ordinary evening was anything but normal. They had just seen something extraordinary, a lesson in restraint, authority, and respect, delivered not with loud words or aggressive action, but with quiet, unshakable composure. Keanu Reeves sat at his corner table once again, hands wrapped gently around his cappuccino. His wife, smiling softly, leaned in to touch his hand. It was a small gesture, intimate and human, yet it carried a profound weight. The chaos that could have erupted had been replaced with calm. The mockery of the bikers had been transformed into recognition, humility, and understanding. This moment was more than just a victory over tension. It was a living example of the power of calm. People often believe that authority must be loud, forceful, and dramatic to be respected. But here, on a quiet London street, the lesson was different. Respect, true respect, is earned through composure, integrity, and empathy. It is quiet. It is deliberate. And it lasts far longer than any raised voice or rash action. The cafe patrons began murmuring to each other again, but now their words carried awe instead of fear. "Did you see how he just handled that?" whispered one. Another replied, "It wasn't even a fight, he just changed everything with his presence." Even the officers who had approached initially nodded silently, acknowledging the unexpected authority that had diffused the situation without the need for force. The bikers, walking away with heads bowed slightly, had also learned a lesson, whether they admitted it aloud or not. Arrogance, mockery, and aggression might intimidate briefly, but they cannot withstand quiet strength. The tallest biker, who had laughed the loudest moments ago, glanced back one last time. His expression was thoughtful, almost reverent. He had been reminded that strength isn't always shown in bold gestures. It is often found in measured restraint. Keanu's wife whispered, "You've taught them all something today." He smiled, not with pride, but with the calm satisfaction of someone who knows the right choice has been made. "Sometimes the most important victories," he replied softly, "are the ones that no one applauds but everyone notices." And that was the heart of the story. Ordinary moments, like sitting in a cafe on a rainy afternoon, can carry extraordinary lessons. A simple act of composure can transform tension into understanding, mockery into respect, and fear into admiration. These moments may seem small, but their impact lingers far longer than anyone realizes. For the viewers watching now, there is a takeaway. Life will always present situations where people challenge you, provoke you, or test your patience. The easy reaction might be anger, confrontation, or aggression. But the path of calm, measured action, of quiet authority and respect, often yields outcomes far more powerful, and far more lasting. And here's where you come in. If this story resonated with you, if you believe that calmness, respect, and integrity are real forms of strength, take a moment to show it. Type respect in the comments below red heart. Share where you're watching from. Let's see how far this lesson travels. Moments like these remind us that true authority doesn't need to shout, and real strength doesn't need to dominate. It is in the small, deliberate choices we make when no one is forcing us, and when the world seems poised for chaos. Every calm, thoughtful action has a ripple effect. Take a second to reflect on that. Think about the last time someone challenged you, or the next time it will happen. Remember what you just saw. Remember the quiet power of composure. And if you truly want to be part of this community, share this story with someone who needs to see it. Whether it's a friend, a colleague, or a stranger, remind them that respect, patience, and calm are not weaknesses. They are the most powerful tools we have. As Keanu finished his cappuccino, the street outside had fully returned to its normal rhythm. But the lesson remained. The bikers had left, the officers had returned to their duties, and the cafe had resumed its ordinary hum. But everyone who had been present had experienced something extraordinary. And that's the story. Ordinary afternoon, extraordinary lesson. Calm, composure, and respect can change the world, one small moment at a time. So, if you believe in this power, type respect below. Share this story. Spread the lesson. And remember, sometimes the quietest actions are the loudest statements the world will ever hear.